Hello guys, this is James. I think after the first video of reactivity, we have a general idea of how we can make any data in JavaScript reactive and how we really render the page with the reactive data. Now let's just hop in and get bottom of how the reactivity in Vue works. Because it's something very essential, so I use separate video to explain it. On the top of this page, there are a few lines of Vue code. Here we have a div. The idea is to bind with instance of Vue, and also here in the new view, we just define a data counter equals to 1. And in our HTML, we just use twice of the counter, wrap it in a p tag. Now let's start at the point that when the instance is created by using new view. When we use new view to start a view instance, two things will happen. The first one is like what we have done in the last video. There's observer, and what does the observer do? It will just look in the data and say, oh, there's a counter. Then it will just use the object.define property to set a getter and setter for the specific variable. In the future, any change of it, the observer will be the first one to know that, okay, if there's new value assigned to it or the variable is being read. So let's set a role for the observer. It is meant for observe the change. So we put change here. Meanwhile, new view also have to set a compiler here because HTML itself doesn't understand any of syntax of view. It doesn't understand the v-if, v-for. It also cannot understand anything like the bracket. So we should use a compiler to translate what's only in view to what the HTML can understand. For instance, if we have a v-for in a p tag, maybe the compiler just simply translate v-for to different p tag, and then the HTML might understand, okay, the v-for just means that here I should put a list of the p tag. So the compiler knows too well which one the HTML can understand and which one is the syntax of view. So in contrast to the role of observer, which is just to observe the changes or when the value is read, compiler should know each line of the DOM and knows which line includes the reactive data. Therefore, I will put a no here, means that the compiler knows which is the directives or the syntax of view. Since now we're aware of observer and compiler, let's talk about the first time to render the page. When the first time the page is rendered, of course, the value of those view variables will be read, right? In our code, counter will be read. When counter is read, of course, it will invoke the getter function in the observer. So in our code, count gets its own value 1. However, for the observer, it only knows everything we define in the data. It has zero knowledge of where we put our variable in the DOM. The compiler can recognize, I just put here, recognize the structure of the HTML. He knows in the DOM of HTML which parts correspond to the value. So before the rendering of the page at the first time, it is wise for the observer to give all the read value to compiler. Since compiler knows well those directives or any syntax of views in the DOM of HTML, it will associate those values with the corresponding DOM. And what is done after compiler is there is an updater function. The function of updater actually is just call something like inner HTML. Calling the inner HTML, of course, is to render the page. Until now, we have talked about the first rendering and how the compiler changed the different syntax of view to something the HTML is familiar with. After the first rendering of the page and some moments later, alright, the value of counter has changed. Now the question pop out, how we can render the page again, given the value of counter has been changed. Of course, the page cannot automatically or magically render itself again. We should add something more here to make the whole thing work. We create a watcher here. We want the watcher to watch each of the DOM. If there any change happened, it should really get the changed value, then render the page with new value. And now we can relink the watcher to our compiler or link the watcher to our observer. But which one we really should link the watcher? Because the observer knows the change of the values, or he knows that which data is reactive and which one is not. Compiler, in another hand, also knows which data is reactive. I think the answer is very easy. It should link with the compiler, because our logic is use watcher to watch each DOM. Observer have no knowledge about the DOM, only compiler has the knowledge about DOM. So we make association between the compiler and the watcher, means each time compiler recognizes the DOM need to be watched, then the watch will create for that specific DOM. In our case, we have used twice of the counter in the DOM, so 2 watcher will be created rather than 1. Next time, if we change the value of counter to 2, then of course the observer will observe the change. We'll try to notify, hey, watcher, you should watch out. There's the value of counter has changed. You should really update. But here's the problem. The observer have no knowledge about the DOM there. So it doesn't mean how many watcher we have created. Actually, we create 2. But the only thing it knows is that, okay, there's just 1 counter, the value has been changed. To solve this inconvenience, we just create another thing, named dependencies. In short, I just write DEP. So the dependency will play the role to connect all the watches of one reactive variable. Creating one dependency for one variable have its upside, because observer just observe each variable and dependency just create one dependency for each variable. So by creating one observer, we just exactly creating one dependency. Since now we added dependency, our logic becomes when there's value changed, the first observer will notify the corresponding dependency, and then dependency will subsequently notify its watchers, because prior to that it has connected all the watchers already. Then the watcher can notify the updaters to update all the DOM. So that's the whole chance of every modules we added here. Also, the upside of setting a dependency is that in the process, maybe we just create another tag, p tag to include the counter. So new watchers can be created and then it can feed back to dependency. And next time, if the value of the 3 counter change, then the dependency will notify all the 3 watchers. So all the 3 watchers can update its HTML DOM. So we can see that to achieve the reactivities in Vue, it really break it down to different modules. Each modules have its own functionality, and of course they have their connection, link, and association with each other. With everything work together, they can really achieve this reactivity. In the next video, we will write our own codes of Vue reactivity based on the logic we analyzed today. By writing the codes ourselves or polyfill, we can really understand better the mechanism of reactivities in Vue. So that's for this video, and thanks for watching.